Welcome to Project Comedy, a podcast by and for military veterans doing stand-up comedy, turning military banter into quality stand-up comedy acts. We might be veterans, but our comedy aims to get everybody laughing. Step out onto a stand-up comedy stage and you have an option. You can go out there and make people laugh as you. Or you could take the opportunity to become somebody else. Why limit yourself? Why not be an actor and become a totally different person that makes people laugh? There are loads of people on the circuit, open mic acts and professionals that assume a character when they walk on stage. Some are subtle, some are extreme. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of using a comic character when performing? Indeed, do we all do it to some degree? Well, it's just the two of us this time for this podcast. Why? Because clearly us two don't have enough of a personality ourselves, and we're thinking about becoming different people. So this podcast is brought to you by Jamie. I love making a mess and hate nerds Johnson, and I'm Jay Saunders, Major General, retired. Honestly, hiya, mate.
Hello.
It was a pity we didn't have you on the last record, mate.
Mate,
I ended up having a real riot myself and Gabe.
I was roaring with laughter after hearing it. It was great. I was torn. I was torn between coming onto the podcast and doing my geek night until my mate phoned me up and said, we need somebody to make the brews. I thought, well, I'll best get my arse down to his place then.
And I was thinking about you last night when I was doing my gig. I sent you a photograph of it. Right next to my gig is a gaming club. It's a board game and RPG and Dungeons and Dragons, Warhammer, and what have you, evening club. They literally set up for you've got to come down and gig with me, mate, because we can go in there first.
That would be my idea of heaven. Surely would. what makes it worse? Yeah. What makes it worse is my mates. I've been nerding with him for best part of more than 35 years now, and he never served, but his dad did. His dad was in the artillery, and I thought best not argue with the son of a gunner.
Well, you were in the Air Force, mate. It means you are, industrial level tea maker. You know how to make the wets.
That was my trade. My pseudo trade was avionics. I made the brews and I did the bacon and egg banjos on a Friday morning.
So this particular episode, we're looking at comedy characters because it's one of the things that Jay Sodergaard takes us through on the intermediate course of, do you want to think about creating a comedy persona? And then when you actually look at it, not every stand-up has to be themselves. They can end up becoming a different character if they want to. And some people do it to great effect. It's made them very, very famous, very, very successful that they've been playing with characters. And in some ways, psychologically, using a character could also be a defense mechanism. And I thought we'd spend a few minutes to start off with talking about some of the comedians out there on the circuit, past or present, that use characters to effect. Who's the first one you think of, Jamie?
First one I've got in my head is Al Murray, pub landlord. That guy's made that character his own. Yeah.
It's stunning, isn't it? Especially when you know the backstory to how he made the pub landlord. So I was listening to him being interviewed on a program a while ago on Radio 4. And it turned out that it was when he was doing Edinburgh with Harry Hill. Okay. And they were going around venues. And he said, well, why don't I pretend to be the bloke that, owns this pub or this bar? And I'll introduce all of the acts as a really pissed off landlord. And it was just a one-off thing. And, he even says, so when you see it's Al Murray, the pub landlord, he thought that what he was going to do was have loads of different characters. So tonight he's going to be Al Murray, the pub landlord. Another night it's going to be Al Murray, a different character.
Yeah.
And it's such a brilliant persona because he can get away with the pub landlord can get away with saying some really, really dark stuff.
Yeah. And he could say, it wasn't me, it was the pub landlord.
Well, it's genius, isn't it? Because it's that moment of, hello, I had a beep in the background. It is that genius of the pub landlord is bigoted, he's misogynistic, he's crap with women, he's completely inappropriate with women. I mean, the fact, that standard line, a pint for the gent, a glass of white wine for the lady. What do you do for a woman? Do for a job, love? Oh yeah, you're a secretary. You couldn't say that as a real human being, but to say it as a bigoted landlord of a pub that you know is fiction, it enables him to say things that no normal person would be allowed to say in the modern era.
Yeah. What another one? What's your name, sir? Francois. Real English name.
Yeah, beautiful English name. Beautiful English name. Means servant to the English. It really is clever the way he ends up playing with that. Another one that I was going to go into, mate, was Sacha Baron Cohen. Yes. Because he's had so many different characters. He reinvents his characters. So this is the point I wanted to make about characters. You don't have to be defined by just having one, like Al just does the pub landlord. Sacha, starting off with Ali G and having Borat and what have you, he can reinvent himself to fit the times of the comedy that he wants to work on.
He even did that to, what was it, an Austrian sort of like MTV reporter. What was his name? Bruno, another one. So yeah. So it was like, what was the like Zoolander? It was sort of like an extension of Zoolander. Yeah.
I'm not saying in any way that he was plagiarizing or copying, but he created a new character that fitted into that oeuvre.
Yes, and you wouldn't think that he played it that well that you wouldn't think he was previously Ali G or Borat. Yeah. Totally different personas.
And I'm going to link it. I'm going to link it into something historical. Bless him, because he's still with us. But Barry Humphries, there's an example of a man that could invent new characters, even back then. In the fact that he had the most famous of them all, Dame Edna Everage,
legendary,
but also Sir Les Patterson. So he could bounce between whichever character he wanted to be. And again, it's very much like the ability of the pub landlord, that Dame Edna and Sir Les could say things that nobody in modern society would be allowed to say.
Yeah.
They can push I suppose that's the power of having a character like they've got, is you can be politically incorrect, but still say safe, because it's a character saying it, not a flesh and blood human being. I can get told off for some of my jokes, and I have been told off for some of my jokes because it's me telling them. But when the character says that, I get it. We're going through two layers of disbelief here. It's a character said it, not a real person.
Yeah. Used to great effect when he used to do I forget the name of the chat show, but he did this chat show with as Dame Edna Everage, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
I suppose you could say the same for Ali G, couldn't you?
Well, you've also got, that's just reminded me of one that's not on my list, but Paul O'Grady.
Paul O'Grady. Yeah.
Being Lily Savage. Oh my God. I mean, what a delight that was. Lily could get away with murder.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like, and I know people will try and put him in the same box as Julian Clary, but he's not Julian Clary. It was, there is a full-blown drag act being outrageous and bringing drag to a far broader audience. But Lily, you knew Lily was going to misbehave. Julian was just a very camp performer. Sorry, correct myself. Is a very camp performer and quite provocative, but Lily could get away with more than Julian would.
Yeah.
Any others you can think of, mate? Really good character performances.
One that springs to mind is fairly recent, and it's because of his character. I didn't like him when I first saw him. It came on BBC Three. Lee Nelson.
Lee Nelson. So actually, real name Simon Brodkin.
Yes.
And the fact that he has, oh God, this reminds me of something. Yeah. Right. Sorry. That just I love having PTSD at times, mate, because my brain goes off on butterfly. Chav. Do you know what Chav actually stands for?
No.
Council Housed and Violent.
Okay.
I only found that out a couple of weeks ago, that Chav actually stood for Council Housed and Violent. But he was actually doing from this sort of like this subculture. He was playing in a nice way and in displaying ignorance through a subculture that people encounter everywhere. I mean, for goodness sake, I walk down Commercial Road in Portsmouth and I see Lee Nelsons every bloody day. You see the guys in the baseball hats, the Adidas tracksuit and what have you. I mean, one of my favourite jokes about Portsmouth is how do you spot the bride in Portsmouth? She's the one in the white tracksuit. Every one of us has spotted a character like that in streets, in the supermarket, and what have you. I mean, maybe the one. I did a gig last night, mate, and I nipped into our 24-hour shop to pick up some supplies when I came. I got back about 11:15, and I walked in and I just went, there's a comedy character. There was this young Gosport girl in her pajamas and dressing gown buying vodka. And I'm sort of like, that is a character waiting to go onto a comedy stage.
Yeah.
Because we've all seen people go into the supermarket in their pajamas.
Yeah.
And then they'll defend themselves going, yeah, but these are my posh pajamas. They're fine. They're dressing up pajamas. What the hell are you talking about?
This is my going out night attire.
I've actually heard the line, mate. I'm not joking. I've actually heard somebody say, what are you talking about? This is my going out onesie. The fact that they have a going out onesie is just, I must have to write some material about it. But I could see that being a character. Somebody, I think it needs to be a female doing it. Oh, that's a point. Right, females that do characters. Can you think of anybody?
Caroline Aherne, Mrs. Merton.
Bless her soul. Rest in peace.
The late great Caroline Aherne. Yeah.
I mean, Mrs. Merton, such an invention of genius. And as we were just saying, that thing of you can say things you wouldn't be allowed to say normally.
Yeah.
But did you ever see the Mrs. Was it called Mrs. Merton Interviews or Mrs. Merton Presents or something like that? But it's her chat show.
Yeah.
And when she interviewed Debbie McGee.
Yes.
And it is the line of legend. What first attracted you to the multi-millionaire Paul Daniels?
Paul Daniels, yeah.
How the hell? There's another one. I haven't put on my list. I just remember. And I can't remember his real name. Dennis Pennis?
Paul Kay. You're on about him last podcast.
God, because he did guerrilla comedy as a character. I mean, I know I used it in the last podcast, but it's such a stinging line and so fucking funny. And it's cringe humor. I know it's cringe humor, but it's so fucking funny. When he turned round to Demi Moore and said, if the part really called for it, would you keep your clothes on?
And I agree with what you and Gabe said. I think you need something like that needs to come back, because that was so funny. That I really love that type of guerrilla comedy. Yeah,
the guerrilla comedy seems to have died down now. I mean, we need things like Dennis Pennis back. We need Dom Jolly back. We need some of that guerrilla stuff to happen again and start challenging the status quo. Because I think we're becoming, I hate to say it, but I think comedy's becoming too safe again.
Yeah. I
found it quite surprising last night. There were 7 of us on the bill last night, 7 open micers, doing a set in the corner of a pub. Now, I'm not saying that we were a lovely mixed demographic. We had straights, lesbians, people on the autistic spectrum, me being mental, blah, blah, blah. But I was actually listening to it all and I went, do you know what? So much of this comedy is too comfortable. There's nothing really challenging here. I love and it worked for me because a couple of my gags landed so well because they are pushing that boundary. I'm saying things people don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Things like, one of my favorite gags is, and I've said it on the podcast before, look, I know that I'm not a catch. The only way I'm going to be described as a catch is accompanied by the words chlamydia and syphilis. And the ladies in the room went mental for it because I'm talking about sexually transmitted diseases.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, and it's like a shock that came out of them. The fact that I refer to myself as mental on the stage, you go, you're not allowed to say that anymore. It's not. I'm allowed to say it. You're not. And those little bit. The gag about Hawk, my black Labrador assistance dog, and I turn around and come out with the one thing. I'm talking about my disassociations. And I see stuff that isn't really there. Can somebody explain to me why the fuck they gave me a golden retriever doing blackface? and a white guy making a blackface gag. And there were a couple of black people in the audience as well. And they were the first to laugh. And it really amused me in the fact that they looked at the black people to see if they had permission to laugh. That tickled me so much.
Yeah.
Another legend of comedy characters, Steve Coogan.
What a guy. Alan Partridge. Aha.
But everybody runs to Alan Partridge because that's probably his most successful character.
Yeah.
But he's been doing different characters all the way through his career. There are so many of them.
Was it? I just thought of another one. Was it Paul Carf? Paul and Pauline Carf. Yeah.
I put him in exactly the same bracket as I would Caroline Aherne.
Yeah.
He's got a bank of characters that he can mix it up whenever he wants to. He can address something different with each one of his characters. So it doesn't mean you have to be, this is my character and this is a character I'm going to maintain for the rest of my career. They were very, very clever in the fact that they can morph into different forms of comedy and hit different subjects by which character they're playing. Another example of that, and maybe people aren't going to remember it as well as we do, but Harry Enfield.
Yeah.
Harry Enfield, you look at the beginning of his career, where he had, I'd say the beginning of his career, the beginning of his televised career, where it was Friday Night Live, and it started off with Stavros.
Hello Peeps. Loads of
Hello,
money.
Everybody Peeps. Yeah, then it brought in loads of money.
Yeah.
Then it brought in bugger all money. I mean, loads of money with his Turbo Nutter XR3i. And so many of our younger listeners won't even know what that was, but that was a zooped up Ford Escort.
He actually bought a single. Didn't he go on top of the pops with him? I think.
Yeah. But then as you watch him go through, it's Tim Nicebut.
Fantastic.
And we spoke about Kevin and Perry.
Yeah.
He had the forethought to be able to invent different characters that he could deal with different things at different times.
Wayne Slob.
The slobs. And we would talk about them last night. Spudulika is still one of my favourite jokes ever.
It's exotic.
Still. Here's one that's fallen into comedy. He's actually an actor, and then he just did a couple of videos, and it's turned into a full touring show now of pure comedy, and it's political comedy, and that's of is it Jonathan Pye or is it Jeremy Pye? I can't remember. My PTSD's gone all over the place, mate.
Jonathan Pye.
Jonathan Pye. The news reporter doing his cutaways with his producer in the box.
Yeah.
Now, he's the first one man to admit he's an actor, not a comedian. I will now turn around and say, sorry, mate, you are now a comedian. You're writing the same way as us. You're performing the same way as us. You are bringing the attitudes the same way as us. Yeah. You're a comedian now. And I love the fact that he's angry about every politician.
He's apolitical, not just which makes one side of the divide. Yeah.
It's a genius invention, and he's fallen into comedy. Yeah. But mate, oh God, I'm gonna have to make sure the Project Comedy and my Twitter accounts follow him, because I think what he does is outstanding. Again, we go to that point of Nish Kumar couldn't tell the jokes he does.
True. Yeah. And I would term him as a political comedian. Yeah.
Yeah. Nish is very, very political, but Jonathan Pye can get away with more because you're not allowed to get that angry on stand-up. As a standard, stand-up person, if you were just being that angry about a political subject, you'd be booed off the stage going, we're not here for a political rally.
Yeah.
But when Jonathan Pye does it, you realize it's a character doing it, so you give them more leeway.
Yeah.
So he's found a new way to break into satire and political comedy by using that character of I have to be nice when I'm on the camera, but when I'm speaking to Tim in the production office, for fuck's sake, why are we even reporting on this stuff? Very, very clever.
Yeah.
I'm going to mention a couple of other guys that I absolutely adore, mate, because they use character to effect. Richard Iowati and James Acaster being socially awkward.
Yeah.
Being socially awkward. And you can see the intelligence behind the awkwardness. They are clearly highly functioning, highly intelligent people.
Yeah.
But to be able to connect with an audience, they put this awkward facade in.
Yeah.
That enables you to connect with them more. So like, they're not. I think the joy of those two is their characters work so well because instantly they're trying to portray something that's inferior to you.
Yeah. I love Richard Iowati on IT Crowd. What's his name? Moz on IT Crowd.
Yeah.
And
you know the joke about that, don't you? The real life joke about Moz's character.
No, go on.
The guy that wrote it turned around to Richard and said, so I've got a character that's based on you. So he's called Moz, it's on the IT Crowd, blah, blah, blah. And he went, okay, so how do you want me to play it? He went, as you. He says, no, but what tricks do you want me to bring? He went, no, you've got to be you. You are being an exaggerated form of you. And he wrote it purely with Richard in mind, an exaggerated form of his own self.
Yeah. So I've seen characters like Moz, characters like what's the Irish fella's name? If Gabe was here, he'd know. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Him, the woman manager. They're all exaggerated characters of actual people I know. So it was just so funny to see them. Yeah.
And it's one of the things I love about those two particular characters that Richard and James use is I've seen it on the stage before. That when somebody steps up there, if they come across as superior or more intelligent, or they had an easier take in life, or they're privileged, the audience hate them.
Yeah,
it's the fastest way to break connection with an audience. But the characters that they've generated, they're automatically inferior to their audience. Yeah. So it makes the audience happier to laugh at them and with them, because the guy on the stage isn't more important than you. And I find that with my own comedy. When I'm taking the piss out of myself, when I'm doing the self-deprecating stuff, I get the better laughs out of the audience because they're going, oh, I'm not as sad as that fucker. There is something empowering about having that kind of attitude and what have you, that kind of persona, to let you build a better connection.
Yeah. And I can think of another of his characters, and being as it's me and you, we can draw upon the nerdosphere. Star Wars: The Mandalorian. He played a droid, and what's more socially awkward than a droid?
Maybe that's our future casting. Maybe we're going. Yeah, if there's season 2 of Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you and I are going to be cast in it?
Get in touch. Get in touch if you need a pair of socially awkward English
Disney.
droids.
If you want two nerds to be funny on something, we'll be there.
Okay. So James Acaster.
Yeah.
He plays the social awkward guy pretty well as well, doesn't he? Yeah. And he does that hypothetical with what's his name?
With Josh Widdicombe.
Josh Widdicombe. Yeah. That's funny.
Josh Widdicombe, if I remember rightly, Josh Widdicombe got famous because he did a televised comedy contest. so you think you're funny. I'm going to have to double check, and I'll confirm that later in the episode. But I'm sure that he got famous because he did a talent show.
Yeah.
But you put those two together, and it's a brilliant match. Suddenly, Josh Widdicombe, the guy from Dartmoor that went to school when in his year there were 4 kids, he should be socially awkward.
Yeah.
Place him with James Acaster, he's the normal one. And that balances those two together so beautifully.
Yeah.
Do you follow any of James's podcasts?
He did the parenting one.
No, so that's Josh. Josh does that with the East London boy with the huge teeth. I hate PTSD. I can't remember names.
I can picture him. I can picture his face. He does a lot with Ramesh Ranganathan.
Exactly. His name will come back to me at some point. Ladies and gentlemen, I do apologise. This episode is brought to you by a mental breakdown caused by PTSD. I cannot remember a single name. I think at this precise moment, my name is Julia.
What day are we? This day.
It is 2027, isn't it?
So yeah,
but he does.
I don't follow any of James's podcasts. No.
So he's got 2, and it shows the comedy network and the connections and friendships. So he's got Off Menu with Ed Gamble.
Yeah.
So they do a podcast about food.
Yeah.
Because it's the obsession of Ed Gamble, because he used to be massively overweight. He's type 1 diabetic and what have you, and he struggles with food at all times. Okay. And James is obsessed, and I mean beyond obsessed, with ice cream. I mean, you want to go nerd, that man can list off every brand internationally of Ben and Jerry's and their ingredients. But there's also Hypothetical, the podcast.
Right, okay.
2 brilliantly diverse podcasts about different subjects and what have you, but so much fun to listen to. And hearing James's character going all the way through, I think that's stunning. What we'll do for 1 second is we'll just take a brief moment to let you find out how you can join Project Comedy, and then we'll come back into talking about why it's useful to use a character, or maybe why it could be a hindrance to you. Are you a veteran, or even still serving, and think you'd like to give stand-up comedy a go? Then why not join us in Project Comedy? Visit the Project Recce website, that's projectrecce.org, then click on how it works. You'll find a Register Here button in the Project Comedy section. Fill that in, and the HQ staff will soon get you connected with the Project Comedy community and its weird and wonderful ambassadors. You'll be invited to our green rooms, where if you want it, we can train you in the basics. If not, you can just come along and have a laugh with us and see what we're up to and what it gives us.
Rob Beckett, that's the guy that does the parenting one with
Rob Beckett. Oh, good God. How did I bloody forget that? Right, yeah, I apologise, PTSD. Thank God my psychiatrist and psychotherapist don't listen to this podcast. Although, hello, mate. My peer support worker does, and he's now going to report me for having memory lapses again. That's just a big shout out to all the guys in Op Courage. I do know there are several members of staff that work for Op Courage that do listen to the podcast. So thanks, guys. You're helping me through. What do you think is the advantage? What do you think are advantages of using a character rather than being yourself on stage?
You can hide behind the character, so it allows you to be more experimental with your material.
And I suppose it's also got that thing of, and I didn't think about it when I was doing my first, you and I, we started during lockdown too. So our first series of gigs were via Zoom.
Yeah.
We had a defense mechanism called a laptop to keep you distant from an audience. But I suppose if you walk onto the stage as a character, if you bomb, they don't like the character. It's not that they don't like you.
You can always come back with something else. Yeah.
You've got your osprey on. You're suddenly wearing body armor because if they don't like what you're saying, it's not you they don't like, it's the character they don't like.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to, especially, okay, this podcast is for anybody that loves comedy or is interested in getting involved in comedy. But for, sort of like our audience, our core audience, I suppose, is veterans, including wounded, injured, and sick veterans. That's something to consider. If you're too scared to get on the stage, well, why not think about going on the stage as somebody else? Because it will give you, suddenly you've got your osprey on, you've got a loaded SA-80. If they start shooting at you, they're not shooting at you. You've got those layers to protect you. So it could become a far safer place to perform if you're performing under a character.
Yeah. It's almost as though you're putting a war face on.
Absolutely. Get the camo on.
Yeah.
Get the camo paint on yourself and away you go.
Yeah.
The other thing, and we've mentioned it before, but I think this is the joy of comic characters, you can get away with saying more. If it's clear to the audience that you're a character, not a regular human being, you're allowed to say stuff that natural human beings are not allowed to say.
Yeah. Case in point,
and
Borat.
I suppose that frees you. Borat, oh, for God's sake. What? I mean, as Borat, he's made some horrible anti-Semitic statements.
Yes.
Whereas he's actually a Jew himself.
Yeah.
It also enables you to be potentially braver than you really are. I mean, here's a lovely little example I'll use for it. Loved on the circuit. He's not seen as much on TV as I think he should be these days, but Lee Evans.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing comedian. But Lee, that's a character. He is one of the shyest, most nervous people on the planet. But his character is manic and over-energetic. That is not Lee Evans, the real person. That is Lee Evans, the performer.
Yeah. And I would say my take on him as a character would be a modern day equivalent of Norman Wisdom.
Yeah, I like that take. I like that take because he brings so much more physicality and slapstick, almost slapstick into it. Although it's a solo act.
Yeah,
that's just made me think of the lad from Bolton. Again, my PTSD brain's not working. It's done loads of Peter Kay. Yeah. That's clearly a character. Peter Kay is clearly a character. That is not Peter Kay, the human being.
Well, when he first, interesting fact, when he first started, his first break was Channel 4 before Phoenix Nights, and it fits perfectly into this episode. His first show for Channel 4 wasn't Phoenix Nights, it was the Peter Kay thing. And that was a sketch show of him being different characters. And I'm just trying to recall what a few of them were. He played one of them, he played an ice cream man, Mr. Whippy. Another he was I'm sure he was a manager in a motorway service station.
Oh God, I remember that one.
And obviously another one was Dennis Potter. From that spawned Phoenix Nights, but I'd say from any of those characters, he could have spawned a comedy show. It just happened that Dennis Potter took off and he did 2 series of Phoenix Nights, which I still find hilarious today. So yeah, he is another great example of a character comedian. Yeah. And of course, he's like the last one he does. What was it called? The one where he was always driving to work. Car share. He was with.
Car share.
Was he with Sally Phillips?
God, she's gorgeous. No, it's not Sally. No, look, I admitted my total and utter love for Sally Phillips in the last podcast record, mate. I know Sally must be taking out a restraining order on me now. But
it wasn't
her.
It
wasn't Sally.
What's her name? I can't think.
She
of her
did
name.
Taskmaster.
Yes, she was on Taskmaster.
Right, sorry. This is where Jay reaches to Google, and Sean Gibson.
Yes.
Sean Gibson.
Yeah, Sean.
Oh God, no! Sorry, there's another comedy crush I've got. There are too many female. I could do an entire podcast record about all the ladies in comedy that I have serious crushes on.
Yeah.
And Sean is one of them. Sean is one of them. She is just. There is something so delectably lovable about her. No matter what she does, you just want to stick her in your pocket and keep her close. She is brilliant. And what a match with Peter Kay, because
Totally.
not only comically but physically, because she's this tiny little waif of a dot of a thing with a guy that always takes the mickey out of himself for being rotund.
Yes.
They work so. It's almost like a male-female duo of Little and Large.
Yes. That's a nice little segue into to double acts. I know you were talking about them last time and thinking, are there any sort of modern day double acts? I'd say they were for that car share. Also, James and Josh, they were, like you say, they worked together as a double act. Yeah.
Now, there's a beautiful point, mate, I hadn't considered in last week's episode. You look at the double acts, they're characters.
Yeah.
So
again, another character, Taskmaster, Greg Davis and little Alex Horn.
And Alex Horn.
Yeah.
Little Alex Horn. He's 6'4". And there we go. That links back in so many of the episodes we've talked about. There's a double act. There's self-deprecation.
Yeah.
Being brought into it. You turn around to, if you look at the history of the double act to end all double acts, as far as I'm concerned, Morecambe and Wise.
Yeah.
If you saw how they got together, they were a massive failure. They were a massive failure early on in their career. And you went, I'll be the thick one. You be the smart one that's really an idiot. And that formed Morecambe and Wise. They were playing characters. They were not Eric Morecambe and Ernie Wise. They were stage personas. And then turn around to so many of the other double acts, Cannon and Ball. Yeah. Bobby Ball wasn't that thick. That was a character.
Yeah.
You know, Cannon was not always the straight guy. And you look at those double act performances, absolutely, those double acts. I have only just realized it in making this particular podcast episode. They are character performances because that's what makes a double act work.
Because Bobby Ball was actually quite a versatile actor. I saw him in that sitcom Mount Pleasant. He was in that.
Oh yeah.
Along with another character from Phoenix Nights, right? What was his name? Paul? Is it Paul Entwistle? Who played Ray Von, the gypsy.
And here's one I can't believe we've not spoken. We didn't speak about last week, but we can definitely bring in this week. Again, this is going into characters, and this goes into self-deprecation and double acts. Mitchell and Webb.
Wow. Yes.
Because Rob Webb isn't that confident. David Mitchell isn't that insecure, but they dial it up to 11 to make it work in that. When they were doing that Mitchell and Webb look, the follow-on to that Mitchell and Webb sound, when they did their cutaways supposedly as themselves as human beings, they most certainly weren't. That was character comedy.
Yeah. And I think that's the pertinent point of characters is you have to be an extreme of something to make it work. Otherwise, you'd just be the human being. You know, you've got to dial it up to 11, haven't you? Whatever sort of focus you're going to put on, whatever personality you're going to put into your character, you've got to turn that to the max to make it work.
Let's flip it on its head. Do you think there's any disadvantages to doing a comedy character? The first one that occurs to me, mate, is comedy fatigue. Are you going to be running the same gags over and over again? For example, a comic I absolutely adored. He's got a very similar accent to mine at the moment, Jethro.
Yeah.
That was a character. Jethro was a character, but you knew the gags that Jethro was going to tell.
Yeah.
And it got a bit samey. And it could be you could go and see a show to see Jethro perform, and it's sort of like, I know these are all brand new gags, but they feel so familiar that it doesn't feel new anymore.
Yeah.
So I think there is a danger that you're limiting yourself into that one character. You can only say the things that character can say.
Yeah. I suppose Alan
the
Partridge as well. We've already spoken about it, but he's done so many sort of revamps of the same character as him. When he could be exploring new character. I mean, I've just finished watching a show he'd done on Channel 4, Chivalry, where he plays this executive producer in Hollywood. Total.
I'm so glad you said that. Because it reminds me of somebody that I've admired for years, but I'm now bored of, and that's Rowan Atkinson. Because Rowan's had so many characters. If we take all of the Blackadder characters, and what have you, brilliant. He's done Bean to death.
Yeah.
Bean, he is now Bean. And it's like, can he return to the comic status he had before? Because he is now Mr. Bean. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to give you an example of a character he was, and I wish he'd done more of. And you didn't. You talked about sitcoms last time, and you didn't bring it up. And it's one of my favorite shows growing up, and it's the Thin Blue Line, where he played the police inspector.
Yes, where he played the sergeant.
Yeah. And you had all the stereotypes of different police officers. And I remember the camp one. Oh, what's his name? James Dreyfus.
Yes.
where I think it was, and I can't think of the lady's name. The Asian comedian.
Oh God!
I know a character name. Constable Habib. She was a character name, and she says to him, "Is that a Mars bar in your pocket, or are you just pleased to see me?" And he, she walks off, and he pulls out a Mars bar. Things like that. Yeah, I thought that was a really great show, and I just wish they'd done more of it. Mark Addy, another
Mina Awar. I had to remember her name. Mina Awar. That was her name.
Mina Awar. Yes, that's your PTSD coming back. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you remembered the name. Ladies and
gentlemen, if you have PTSD, you end up with name Tourette's. Once the name comes to you, you start screaming it everywhere.
And the guy wasn't. He played the CID fella. He had arguments with Rowan Atkins' character, and he was like hoity-toity, arty-farty, airy-fairy. I can't think of his name. He was every character in that show was funny. It just worked to me, and it's a shame that he's Rowan's remembered for Blackadder and Bede, and not the guy at the Thin Blue Line.
Let's turn it into slightly more relevance then.
Okay.
So we've spoken about all the people that are great at doing it, that have done amazing things with it. We've spoken about the advantages of doing it. We've had a little discussion on the disadvantages. Let's talk about us going onto the circuit. In some way, do you think you automatically, even if it's unintentionally, place a character on when you step onto the stage? I'm going to talk for myself. In the fact that when I step onto the stage, I'm not Jay Saunders. That's my name, but the performance I give isn't my natural self. There is some degree of a character when I'm on stage. Do you think you do the same?
I suppose so. Subconsciously, I must be, because the real me would have trouble going onto the stage. So yeah, I suppose I do to a very small extent. I go on stage and I try to be me. So I don't think my humor delivery has reached the level where I can put myself into a characterization of myself. It would be nice to do, and it's definitely something that I'd like to explore. But yeah, I suppose subconsciously I do put myself into somebody else. Yeah.
I look at myself prior to the operational tour that broke me. And then I ended up with PTSD. And I look at you, and for the civilians listening to this, you may find this weird to understand, but because we hung out with each other after work, when we were socializing, I was the bloke that people used to be around because they knew that they'd end up having a laugh. Not because I was doing stupid or ridiculous things. It was just, I just enjoyed having a laugh and taking a joke and taking the piss and having a laugh and taking the piss out of myself. With PTSD, I lost all of that. I really lost all of that. And now I think this is why it's so effective for me in PTSD recovery, that I'm getting those little bits back. I mean, I must be portraying a character. I can't go into a supermarket. I've mentioned this so many times in the podcast, but since lockdown 3, I have walked into a supermarket 3 times. I've managed, and 2 of those times was with a peer support worker. I have full-blown anxiety attacks and flashbacks when I go into a supermarket. Yeah, I can go to a random pub, stand in the corner of that room and make a bunch of strangers laugh. Clearly, when I step onto the stage, I must be using some form of character.
Yeah.
Because, the natural Jay wouldn't actually be able to do that. So clearly there is some part of me that is putting on a character, putting on a mask, putting on a costume to make an audience laugh.
Yeah. Coming out of my service career, I suffered, and I still do, suffered a lot with imposter syndrome.
Yeah, mate.
Not thinking I was worthy. And if I went on stage like that, I wouldn't be able to deliver a 5-minute set.
And isn't that the magic of comedy? It is to me the purest art form there is. I love art, I love music, I love literature. Yeah. But it's the purest form of art there is, that if you go out and do your job, you have instant feedback.
Yeah.
And if the character is getting the instant feedback, even better. Because you walk out there, I still do it now. I still have imposter syndrome when I step onto the stage. I'm PTSD, I'm mental, I've got a dog. I can't do X, Y, and Z. So why the hell am I standing on this stage? And the first laugh I get, if I've got my first laugh within 10 seconds, I'm there going, I must be doing something right. It challenges imposter syndrome. I'm doing something right. Even though I'm doing it through the mask of the character that I become on the stage, it does challenge my imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And the other thing I find it for, I'm going to directly point this out to any veteran out there with PTSD, anxiety disorders, and what have you. I live my life trying to keep myself calm, collected, keep my heat down, not get angry. This is one of the reasons why I love doing stand-up comedy. It's a safe space for me to be angry-ish. I can get up there and be angry and outraged and blah, 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 and it doesn't affect my PTSD. I don't walk away triggered from it. I get a chance to vent those kind of emotions, those things I have to control in daily life, in public, and I can be this angry, belligerent, pathetic twat on the stage and get laughs back going, oh, okay, it's all an act. It's just a bit of fun, and I can go home. I can burn off those things that are already burning inside of me, that I want to be angry, I want to be outraged, and I can't do it because otherwise it'll make me ill, but I can do it on the stage.
Yeah. Thinking of what we've just been talking about, and tell me to stow my gear if I'm jumping ahead, but 2 guys to me that scream exaggerated characters of themselves when they go on stage are, Bo Burnham and Robin Williams.
Oh my God. Yeah, Robin. I mean, God bless his soul.
Yeah.
He was an exaggeration of himself on stage.
Yeah.
A man pretending to be happy, a man pretending to be calm, a man pretending to be outraged when everything in his life was going horribly wrong for him.
Yeah.
Another example. No, right, you're going to have to help me out here, mate, because my PTSD brain's done it again. The Australian shock comedian, absolutely amazing stand-up comedian. Did a thing about gun control. That was his most famous sketch.
Oh
God, what's his name? Jim Jeffries.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you. Yeah,
there's no way Jim could be that outrageous. That meant he would have died years ago if everything he said is true.
Yeah.
But Jim can be that, his character on the stage. I'm not going to call it character. Let's call it a persona. And that's, it's a very similar thing. But his persona on stage is so heavily biased that it enables him to make the jokes he does.
Yeah.
I think we've realised by making this episode, character is key. Even if you're not intentionally playing a character or putting on a persona, comedy's not a conversation, it's a performance. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not just you reciting dialogue. You are taking on a role. You're acting in a sense on the stage. So why not become the persona, the character that you want to portray to the audience?
Totally, mate. Totally. I mean, so when you take to the stage as a comic, you're automatically assuming a character that isn't you. Here's my excuse to go American on everybody. Let's do our summary in an American way. Ladies and gentlemen, here's tonight's episode's takeaway. You're going to be a character anyway, so why not think of it as a way to play to your advantage and ramp up that character? I mean, especially for our guys. I mean, if you were worried about taking to the stage for the first time, why not take on a character and take that character on the stage for you? This is a comedy performance, so do the right thing and play with it to give an audience a dose of your funny and learn from past comedians and current comedians to give them something new. While it's just been the two team geeks, I've really enjoyed this episode, because I've actually learned something this evening. I would never have done the internal analysis to make the realization that, double acts are nothing more than character comedy. I've never thought of that. It's two characters on the stage. So I have to thank my co-host and fellow Uber nerd, Jamie Johnson. Cheers, mate.
No worries, buddy.
And we've got a great topic lined up for you next week. We had to think up something cool for episode 12, as it'll be our season finale. Don't panic. We'll only be away for 4 weeks. It's just so that me and my fellow ambassadors can show off a bit, and those of them with families can go and spend their time with their families. Me, Lieutenant Commander Lonely Loser here, will just be taking Hawk on some extra late night walks. But it'll give us a little bit of downtime, and we'll also be able to get a couple of episodes into the bank with some special guests we've invited. And I can try and ensure that I have somewhere to live. Who knows? I might end up somewhere where low tide won't impact on the podcast records. But next week, we're going to be brief on you. We're going to be talking one-liners. Cheers again, Jamie. Thanks so much for helping me make this episode happen.
Pleasure, mate. Pleasure.
And as always, we'll close off with a few social media links for you to keep up to date with everything that is Project Comedy. You've been fantastic, and we've been the Combat Comics.
Cheerio.
If you want to see what we're actually like on stage, please have a look at our YouTube channel. Search for Project Comedy, Veterans Doing Stand-Up, and look for our black and white logo that's exactly the same as the one we use for this podcast. You can also now follow us on Twitter. We can be found at Proj Comedy. That's at PROJ Comedy. I'm E.J. Saunders. I can be found on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter if you look for Comic J Saunders. That's all one word with the letter J in the middle. Comic J Saunders. Thanks again to everyone that's taken part in this episode. Until next time. Thanks for listening to the Project Comedy Podcast. Please support our veterans as they continue their comedy journeys. To find out more, including gigs our veterans are doing, please search for the Project Comedy group on Facebook, where you'll also find links to Project Recce, the veterans charity that makes Project Comedy possible.